Ja, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, meine Damen und Herren, es freut mich sehr, Ihnen heute Abend Herrn Professor Antonio Palmisano von der Universität Trieste vorstellen zu dürfen. Es freut mich umso mehr, als uns beide eine sehr alte Beziehung verbindet. Wenn ich mich richtig erinnere, war das vielleicht 1980? 78 schon, als wir beide am Religionswissenschaftlichen Institut der Freien Universität Berlin tätig waren, und ich wurde dann später Assistent und du saßt netterweise dann auch in dem einen oder anderen meiner Seminare.
Ja, du hast vielleicht Angst, dass ich dein Schüler gewesen bin. Vielleicht du sagst, ich werde schreckliche Dinge erzählen und wie ich keine Verantwortung dafür trage. Aber ich bin auch sein Schüler gewesen.
Jetzt wollte ich das kollegial lösen.
Nein, ist so.
Ja, wir hatten auch gemeinsame Publikationen.
Ja, das auch.
Also zum Beispiel einige Beiträge von Antonio in unserem Handbuch religionswissenschaftlicher Grundbegriffe, das ich Ihnen immer in meinen Einführungsvorlesungen anpreise als das ultimative Werk. Auch da freut es mich, Ihnen einen weiteren Autor vorstellen zu dürfen. Ja, Antonio ist dann allerdings ganz zur Ethnologie gewechselt in den folgenden Jahren, während ich bei der Religionswissenschaft blieb und dann irgendwie zu meiner eigenen Überraschung dann doch auf einen Ethnologie-Lehrstuhl berufen worden bin. Wir haben uns seither nicht mehr so häufig gesehen, aber ich habe mit großem Interesse verfolgt deine Forschungen, deine Bücher, vor allem das eine, dessen klassischer Titel sich mir so eingeprägt hat, dass ich den Titel behalten hatte, aber nicht mehr die Leute, um die es ging, Mito e Società, über die Lutocho im Sudan. Antonio hat zahlreiche Feldforschungen durchgeführt. Wenn man das alles so zusammenzählt, kommt man wahrscheinlich auf 8 Jahre, und zwar nicht nur in Afrika, sondern auch in Zentralasien, in Lateinamerika, vor allem in der letzten Zeit. Insgesamt hat er dort 18 Monate verbracht, und zwar, wie er mir gerade erzählt hat, um sich von seinem vorhergehenden Feldforschungsaufenthalt in Afghanistan zu erholen. Vielleicht wirst du davon auch das eine oder andere noch erzählen. Und seine Feldforschungen, die haben auch in einer beachtlichen Anzahl von Publikationen ihren Niederschlag gefunden. Einen Titel hatte ich schon genannt, die anderen vorzulesen erspare ich Ihnen, weil sie sind zum Teil auf Italienisch, und das will ich Ihnen nicht zumuten. Es gibt eben aber auch nicht nur natürlich auf Englisch Veröffentlichungen, auf Italienisch, auf Deutsch habe ich schon erwähnt, und aber auch auf Spanisch, also ein international forschender wie auch publizierender Wissenschaftler, den wir heute Abend hier bei uns begrüßen dürfen, der anderen eben voraus hat, auch eine, ja, korrigiere mich, wenn ich es falsch sage, eine praktische Orientierung, zumindest der Aufenthalt in Afghanistan, der war durchgeführt worden, auch im Auftrag der italienischen Regierung, und er war dort tätig als Senior Advisor für die Reform des afghanischen Rechtswesens. Ich mache jetzt hier einfach Schluss und begrüße dich nochmal ganz herzlich zum ersten Mal hier in Frankfurt, nachdem wir letzten Oktober in Halle schon einen so schönen Vortrag gehört hatten von dir beim Plenum der DGV über Berlin als die Insel der seligen Ethnologen. Aber heute geht es über Anthropology Tomorrow, also nicht über die selige Vergangenheit. Anthropology Tomorrow between Protokollaufnahme and Dialogue or from written to spoken Anthropology.
Danke, vielen Dank, Karl-Heinz Goll, und danke schön für die Einladung von der Institut des Frobenius, Leiter des Frobenius-Institut, weil das ist ein Ort, wo ich wirklich kommen wollte. Es macht mir unheimlich viele Freude, hier zu sein. Dieser Vortrag wird auf Englisch gehalten und ich werde erzählen, warum, während dem Vortrag. Und es besteht aus 5 Teilen und die ersten 5 Minuten sind ziemlich schwer. So, bitte aber Geduld für die ersten 5 Minuten. Weil es stimmt, was Karl-Heinz Goll sagte, nämlich, dass das ist ein anderer Vortrag, anders als was damals ich in Halle gehalten habe, aber es hat eine rote Faden und ist dieselbe als in Halle. Anthropology is an existential. Noch dazu par excellence. Ist ein existential. This means that it's a character which characterizes the existence in its Sein. Not only this, it characterizes the existence also in the comprehension of this Sein. We have here Heidegger, this is clear. I want to start this short lecture starting with Heidegger. An interesting sentence of Heidegger ist the following: Ethnologie setzt selbst schon eine zureichende Analytik des Daseins als Leitfaden voraus. It is true, I have carried a lot of field work, and especially I've worked a long time as applied ethnologist or applied anthropologist, as ethnologist of development. But I have done this just because I had to eat. This was the only reason. And I want to talk about this point, because it has to do with the future of anthropology. So I had to reach Heidegger in order to do this. What is this Dasein which can be interesting for us as ethnologists? It's a Dasein in the eyes of the anthropologist and in an anthropological perspective. Heidegger underlines the literal sense of Dasein. Da Bindestriche sein. Being there, and we are there. This is constitutive to man. Man is only when he has a there, when he has a here, when he has a horizon, thanks to which he can relate to other entities, to other Seienden. Again, according to Heidegger, das Seiende, dessen Analyse zur Aufgabe steht, sind wir je selbst. So this Dasein is ourselves. And again, always in this paragraph number 9 of his Sein und Zeit, he writes, das Wesen dieses Seienden liegt in seinem Zu-Sein. And again, das Wesen des Daseins liegt in seiner Existenz. So, the essence of the Seiende, this Wesen of the Seiende, consists in relating to others, in relating to other entities, transcending oneself and comprehending oneself in one's own being. It's a kind of transcendency of the self. The ethnologist, more than any other, is legitimated to define Dasein. Since three are the main reasons why we are legitimated to define the Dasein. First, the Da represents the theater, represents the stage of our action as a researcher. Point two, the Da is object of our researches, but is also and especially a methodological constituent of my research, of our research. The object, in fact, is the Da and not the tribe alone. Namely, the object, so-called object of our research is my own Da and the Da of this tribe. There is a contemporaneity of the Da, and this contemporaneity is lived, experienced by both the ethnologist and the indigenous. This is field work, a contemporaneity, and especially is the construction or experiencing of one Da, a common Da. I'm just talking of myth Sein. The Sein, according to Hegel, and also for us, is das Unbestimmte, Unmittelbare. Aber, for the ethnologist, when he is on the field, the Dasein allows das Unbestimmte, Unmittelbare to become das Bestimmte, Unmittelbare. It is already something interesting. We had a short shift in our non-knowledge. When I look at the world of contemporaneity, I observe that the Dasein is actually the post-global world of today. I will not speak about a postmodern society. This was the terminology of Jean-François Lyotard. He says that the Grand Récit disappeared. The great ideologies are not anymore there. I don't think so. I think that the Grand Récit are still there, just that they are hidden, very well hidden. The ideology and the Grand Récit of the race, for instance, is still there. It doesn't disappear, but is well hidden. The ideology of selection, natural or non-natural selection, is still there. And the great Allmacht, Träume oder Wünsche sind immer noch da. Die Selbstvergöttlichung or Vergöttung is still there, is still here. So this world is a world which has an order, and this order is the order of the financial market, is the order of the capital market. We will come on this point. Heidegger manifests in his Sein und Zeit an interesting kind of participant observation, so to say a rural one. He had a beautiful house in Tod Nauberg, and he was talking very much with the peasants. He discussed with them. This was a kind of anchorage to an everyday life of a philosopher, which can be compared with a participant observation. La philosophie de Heidegger, à la fois, éclaire et réhabilite l'être au monde du primitif. The philosophy of Heidegger explains and at the same time make it more clear and rehabilitate the design of the primitive. This is an interesting observation of Dufresne, which is a good specialist of Sein und Zeit. He wrote several books on this topic, especially Janon. This consideration of Dufresne helps us in understanding Heidegger. Être au monde du primitif is a specific design, the world of thought that includes an aconceptual thought. Heidegger was trying to work not only with conceptual, but also with aconceptual thoughts. And he was thinking to be able to find this in this kind of rural experience he had. To some extent, this helped, at least me, to understand ethnology as a kind of telluric philosophy, a chthonic philosophy, and a philosophy which is very much anchored to the territory, to the design to some extent, especially when I want to read the design on a very literal, in a very literal manner and sense. So ethnology is a telluric philosophy, a philosophy that recovers an aconceptual thought, actually exactly through the praxis of the fieldwork. But does ethnology manage to express this? And how? The 5 horrible minutes ended. Now it started the second part, part 2. The end of anthropology? This was the question. We are in our era, which is a post-global era. In our era, in this era, the only things that end are those that do not have a market. This is why anthropology has contracted. This is why anthropology has reduced itself into anthropology of development, into anthropology of this and that, and applied anthropology, and so on. This is why anthropology has contracted itself and reduced itself in the multiplication, in the proliferation we reduced us, in the proliferation of the anthropologies, a differentiation of the product for the market. This is a typical market strategy, the differentiation of the product. Running the risk to confine anthropology among sciences or among plain techne? Is an interesting question. Example, if we can let run some music, I would like you, can we do this? I do it here, for music.
I thought you have a stick. I don't know if there is a...
Ah, so.
I think that's the wrong one because she told me you got a stick.
No, yeah, it doesn't matter. This was a beautiful lead. No, it doesn't matter. It's not so important. I will let you this for those who want to listen. Anyway, you can buy it. It's, we are on the market. This is Schwanengesange der Atlas. The text is of Heinrich Heine, and Franz Schubert is the one who made this music. The Tragedy of Atlas. I read: Ich unglückseliger Atlas, eine Welt, Die ganze Welt der Schmerzen muss ich tragen. Ich trage Unerträgliches und brechen will das Herz im Leibe. Du stolzes Herz, du hast es ja gewollt. Du wolltest glücklich sein, unendlich glücklich oder unendlich elend, stolzes Herz. Und jetzt bist du elend. This is our story. Ethnology, which was considered as a discipline functional to others in the field of social sciences, has been enabled and appointed in the past to carry the policies of development or the policies of postmodernity or the policies of post-globality on its shoulders, as well as the policies of, and especially this, Unterordnung, of this and this and this and this, and especially of das Fremde. And to legitimize them, descriptionism and justificationism did coincide. Always when we are very descriptive, we have this risk to work as justificationists. At least this I experienced in my activity as consultant for some government. I was writing and describing, and all of a sudden I was thinking, my God, I am really legitimating. So what I write become exactly as what the judge writes, a sentence. For somebody is a sentence. I hope not a capital punishment, but who knows. Ethnologists were told, and they also told themselves, that it was a noble and ethic mission. It was what I call the complex of Atlas. To be sentenced and to present the sentence as an honor, as something unique, and even as an identity. Many actually shared this view, unaware of the moral and intellectual wretchedness to which they were destined. Talking with Fritz Kramer, I was listening to him, and he told me, yes, this story of the complex of Atlas I can explain in other terms, namely this society. You call post-global, but this society is characterized by a transition, a transformation from eros to agape. This I find very interesting. Namely, this eros transformed itself in agape, means transformed itself in caritas. And we have this caritative, interesting, strong ideology inscribed in our words, in our modern words. This myth of Atlas is, as all Greek myths, very challenging. In the 11th labor, Heracles had to catch the apples from the garden of the Hesperides. But this was a too hard task. So he was convinced by Prometheus in some version, or by Nereus in other version, to ask Atlas to catch the apples and to give him, but not to pick up these apples directly. Okay, there was the usual snake, the usual monster there, but was not really this the point. The point is that this is one of the very few myths of Heracles, where you have to deal with cleverness and not with power or force. Heracles went to the end of the world and met Atlas there. Atlas was carrying on his shoulder the celestial globe, not the world. And then Heracles asked him, please catch the apples for me. Okay, I will do this, but just you have to keep the celestial globe on your shoulders for a few days. And so he did, okay, I will do this. He does it. Atlas finds the apples, come back, and says immediately to Heracles, oh, you are doing a good work. I can bring directly the apples to your patron. It is just a matter of 3-4 months more, and I will be back. Heracles immediately said, yes, I do. Yeah, just keep you the globe a few seconds so that I can put something on my head that can help me to sustain the globe. And Atlas believed. So he got again the globe. Heracles got his 3 apples and he went immediately away. Greetings and telling thanks to Atlas. So it was a fight between 2 clever guys, not 2 stronger guys. Sometimes anthropologists think to be very clever, especially when they deal with other extreme power or powerful entities, powerful Zayende. Now, in such an epic context, no wonder if the ethnology of development, no wonder if the applied anthropology allows us an essay in applied mythology. We can have also applied mythology. The title of an interesting article which appeared in Current Anthropology, not the last of the reviews, says the title is Proposals for Anthropology in the Nuclear Age. 2 years' work, says the author, I will tell you the name of this author in a few minutes. 2 years' work with the Commission on the Study of Peace and so on has convinced me that there is widespread receptivity to any ideas that anthropologists are able to contribute to the analysis of the major international conflicts and especially to the threat of nuclear warfare. The sources of the arms race lie in conflicts of interests and in images of the other, which are often based on ignorance and stereotypes similar in kind to those which anthropologists have so effectively analyzed in studies of interethnic relations. Beliefs about an innate human propensity to aggression, for instance, or Manichaean ideas about the intrinsic evilness of believed enemies, which have been studied in the anthropology of witchcraft in very sophisticated ways, are highly relevant to suspicions of the intentions of the USSR or the USA. The study of war-making and of peacemaking by anthropologists points to mechanisms of mediation which have their analogus in superpower or other kinds of international hostilities. And he continues, he gives us a beautiful program in 8 points. I read only 2 points of this very articulated program, how to work with anthropology in the nuclear age. Point 4. This is the proposed program. Point 4, to establish in every university and college a course on the anthropology of peace and war, with special reference to global nuclear hostilities. Point 7, and this gives you the idea of this relation to the other. to encourage third world countries to address themselves not only to third world studies, but to studies from their perspectives. You say, this is great. Of the first world, second world relations and the way this affected the third world. Because of their cultural distance, they can provide more detached perspectives and act as cultural mediators and brokers. This is the role of the other in the nuclear age. This is the role of a very sophisticated and extreme applied anthropology. It's really the paradigm of still of positivism. Positivism is still there in anthropology. Strongly, deeply affected is this anthropology by positivism. It is not clear the notion of da in this anthropology. It is not clear the notion of Dasein and who share this Dasein and where. Atlantic ethnology then. We can summarize it this way. Ethnology of development, applied anthropology, and so on. Anthropology has reduced itself to this anthropology much more than we can imagine or we are ready to recognize. We agree with the fact that the era of anthropology is at the end, but also that it is the beginning of the era of the anthropologists. Are two different things. It depends who is practicing anthropology and how. I had several examples of applied anthropology in the French anthropology, but maybe I will publish this. We do not need now. For an ethnologist, say the French anthropology, for an ethnologist, that is for a mediator and political delegate of society. This is an interesting definition of anthropologist. Mediator and political delegate of society, according to several French ethnologues appliqués. For this anthropologist, the enemy, the adversary, the Gegner, has been up to now the state. And this we can find in several ethnographies, in several works of anthropologists, especially where you have to deal with applied anthropology or applied ethnology. Up to now has been the state. Gegner is whoever does not share the experience of the Mythsein. This has been for us. Gegner is whoever does not share the contemporaneity of Dasein and intends to transcend it, constituting himself as a new Sein, a new body configured in corporations or states, in holdings sometimes. Transnational holdings. So I was thinking, a few years ago, Fritz Kramer published a Sammelband with the title Gesellschaften ohne Staat. Today, maybe somebody of us has to write or to collect an essay with the title Gesellschaften ohne Transnational Holdings. Something happened in these 30, 40 years. The Gegner is not anymore the state. In fact, the central instance today, in a post-global time and in a post-global world, is not the state anymore, but these transnational holdings. The legitimate monopoly on the use of sanctions, mainly economic sanctions, has been de facto delegated to them for the constitution of the present centralized order represented by the capital market. The transnational holdings are therefore representing the Gegner of the anthropologist today. okay, mediator and political delegate of society, but not facing the state, facing the transnational holdings. They are hidden very well under this disguise, and they represent actually the Gegner within the process of social and dialogical construction of the world. For dialogical here, I don't mean the term we used in the 80s, namely an ongoing dialogue, a kind of conversation. It's not a matter of conversation. I come. Here is our design. Here is an analysis, short, of the design. Certainly not sufficient, a very plain outline, but let me say, nevertheless, a beginning. And this is why there is a big gap between the scientific ability of ethnology and the social use of ethnology. Many anthropologists have been complaining about this for a long time. For instance, the several French ethnologists as Guy Escuret or others. The anthropologists have been driven out, sent forth from the paradise, from the Garden of Eden. But what kind of forbidden fruit have they eaten? Why they thrown us away from this paradise? Why they are suspicious with us? I mean, why we cannot work with them? Ethnological observations, analysis, and interpretation are not allowed to participate to the hottest debates of the post-global era. After the anthropologist's speech, is there anything left to say for the others? They can only say that they are not interested. Namely, it isn't their interest. We have perhaps understood too much, too clearly, too quickly. Sometimes there is even disenchantment and Säuberung of the teachers of this anthropology. What is das Wesen of Anthropology? Das Wesen des Seienden liegt in seinem Zu-Sein. Das war Heidegger. Fieldwork. Die Aufhebung of the subject-object dichotomy. This can be interesting in the anthropology, because it is in itself an ethical process, also in itself an ethical action. Ethic is immanent to the discipline. Participant observation is not an instrument to obtain facts. It is not an instrument to obtain data, more precise, probable, useful, reliable, and so on. Participant observation is a vision of the world, a choice. It is a way to interpret interpersonal relations. It is a praxis, an attempt to create, to ordinate the world. You can use the Heidegger term herstellen, and you will have a Gestell. In this, it is related to art. It is a common action to realize a superlative analysis, ethnologist and indigenous. It is a testimony of possibility to conceive relationships that are not in terms of Unterordnung and Überordnung. An essay, an attempt. The Aufhebung of the dichotomy subject-object in the research does not cancel the subject, does not cancel the subject in the indefinite cause of the design, but it promotes the constitution of the subjects, of unique subjects, as social actors in a co-constructed dialogical world. And this then, how the research is done, becomes political and ethical action, creating the basis for a new political theology. The objectivation of the other which is Dasein par excellence in the eyes of the ethnologists, especially of the ethnographer, even sometimes in its pure linguistic and grammatical shape, opened and continues to open toward the possibilities of an amoral and immoral action, to create what Heidegger called die Wüste der Welt. The objectivation brings immediately zur Wüste. So we have this problem, subject-object dichotomy, how to lose it, especially when we write. I know that there are the limits of grammar, subject, predicate, object. But we have also to consider grammars and syntaxes who do not have subject, predicate, object. For instance, Latin language had subject, object, predicate. You have a different position. Subject and object are together, and then an action is happening. There is, how to say, more intransitivity in the action. But if you have subject, predicate, object, then surely you have a transitivity. And then one is active and the other is acted upon. This is my way to interpret the Passiones von Fritz Graber as enacted or acting, this dichotomy, which I see in the grammar of the subject-object. We have to construct maybe new language. I have no idea. But we can work. So, die Aufhebung of the dyad acting being acted upon, besides reflecting a specific ethic, it also states the refusal of Verdinglichung, Versachlichung, Vergegenständlichung. It refuses this objectivation. And with this, it dissolves the question of ingerence or non-ingerence of the ethnological action, which is another of the main questions opened in the modern anthropology, the ingerence, non-ingerence of our discipline. How to express das Wesen of anthropology? Participant observation needs an adequate expression then, if it has to be revolutionary, Erlebnis and realized ethics. It can be understood as the expression of Dasein, of the anthropologist in interrelation with the Dasein of the other, to be communicated as such and also to be expressed. Are we facing an interesting case of expression of the expression? But that's really a problem for the anthropology. Anthropology are scientists, so we are taught. Anthropology, this is part 3. Anthropology is the most scientific of the humanities, the most humanistic of the sciences. So Eric Wolf. And again, Geertz and Clifford conceive that anthropologists are first and foremost writers. This is Michael Caritas in Current Anthropology. So, they are scientists and they write. We are taught this, that they are scientists and they write. I don't think that they write and they are immediately Schriftsteller. There is no such an equation. They write, but they can be something else. Writing is a speculative thought, a speculative way to think, a conceptual one. This is a problem, this is the problem of the text. Once we are making this text, and once the text is made or done, it is fixed. If we are practicing an anthropology of the anthropologists, the text will be the anthropologist, and he will be still living text. We can change the text every day or every minute. This can be a solution for many things, this step from written to oral anthropology. In contraposition to the fixed text, we can have this living text. It's interesting what Malinowski wrote in his Myth in Primitive Psychology. Working on the myth and on the role of ethnologists in the analysis of myth, Malinowski wrote this. For the anthropologist, one and only among the many participants in the mythological contest, has the unique advantage of being able to step back behind the savage. Whenever he feels that his theories become involved and the flow of his argumentative eloquence runs dry. The anthropologist is not bound to the scanty remnants of culture, broken tablets, tarnished texts, or fragmentary inscriptions. He need not fill out immense gaps with voluminous but conjectural comments. The anthropologist has the myth maker at his elbow. Not only can he take down as full a text as exists, with all its variation, and control it over and over, he has also a host of authentic commentators to draw upon. Still more, he has the fullness of life itself, from which the myth has been born. So we have this fullness of life. We have to find a solution in order to keep this fullness. And it is not the objectivation of the other, it is not the non-dissolving, the dichotomy between subject and object. The great contribution of anthropology to the world is an oral contribution. Once I was among the Gurage, they are living in Ethiopia, southwest of Addis Ababa, and I went very often to the rural areas. The Gurage are living in Addis Ababa, but of course they are living also in the rural area. So I was going often to them, and before I went to the Gurage, I just told them, look, I will come on Wednesday, so that they could prepare some beautiful happening altogether. This was very important, because men who come from the city and they go to the rural area, they have to bring some goat, some sheep, something. You cannot go with empty hands. You have to go and bring to those who are on the rural side. So once I went to them, we cannot see pictures. No, we do not have this CD. It doesn't work, the CD. Okay. They have wonderful big houses, the Gurage. Some of these houses have a diameter even up to 15 meters, even up to 17 meters. So are very huge houses, circular. And I went there, I entered the house, my house, and the surprise was that there were at least 50, 60 young boys waiting for me. I said, why are these youngs here? What are you doing? You had to come. And some of us listened to the radio. And now we discovered that in Italy you have the cooperatives, so-called red cooperatives. So we would like you speak and you tell us what are these cooperatives. And so we called all the young men, even those who were 8 hours, even one day far. And they were waiting for me. So I had to give a short lecture of 5-6 hours on the red cooperatives in Emilia-Romagna. It was my own vision of the cooperatives. And so we had long discussion. I presented to them my cooperatives, and they presented to me their way to create mutual aid groups. So the great contribution of anthropology is an oral contribution. I didn't write for them. To ask an indigenous, quotation mark of course, about an institution, about a ritual, means to discuss and to concord a possible vision of this institution, of this ritual. A vision that helps the other, the ethnographer, to understand his own, the indigenous, and vice versa, as the American says, or vice versa. But also, we have to ask us, is this a process of construction of this institution? Is this a process of construction of this ritual? Yes and not. Rather not. Of course, we have an interesting process, Vorstellung, Herstellung, and Gestell. But in fact, it is the construction of a meta-institution, of a meta-ritual. It is the construction of an icon, useful for the situational comprehension, that is, for the expression, someday, of a collective Erfahrung. And collective, I mean, it's an Erfahrung of the anthropologist and the indigenous, a joint Erfahrung. Erfahrung of this institution, of this ritual. Why don't we use the dual form? You know, we lost the dual form in the conjugation of the verbs. It's a pity. Maybe we could understand a little bit more of what a subject or an object is if we use the dual form. In this case, it's really a dual construction. I don't think it's really an immediate construction of reality. It's a co-construction of something which is an icon in order to do something else. Institution and ritual are not an sich. They are for the actor, indigenous, and for the actors, indigenous and ethnographer. They are for all actors. They are only thanks to the actors, to all the actors, and to the infinite interpretations. The weight of being a simple function. So we have done some good step. But the emotions aroused in myself, in ourselves, by the single, unique, and at the same time multiplied unique interpretations. Interpretations shared and sometimes deeply shared. These interpretations allow me and allow us knowledge, but also these emotions allows knowledge. That is the knowledge and the compression of this institution, and this ritual has also an important emotional content because it's co-constructed. There is an old question posed related to Clifford's in the predicament of culture, to Clifford's statement of the ideological nature of anthropological knowledge. this was the Cliffords Statement, has the anthropological knowledge an interpersonal and an intersubjective character? Namely, what is the character of anthropological evidence if it is not scientific? This question is maybe wrong, and it is also maybe wrong the following statement of Dan Sperber. Dan Sperber, in his On Anthropological Knowledge, 3 essays, writes, "The resulting description is actually what the ethnographer selected from what he understood, of what his informant told him, of what they understood." This is a one-way process. The anthropologist active in this process and the informant is only passive. It is not at all a subject in this process. It's an Einbahnstraße. The information comes and the anthropologist selects. This is nothing. It doesn't work this way when you are on the field. Never happened to me this, that I had to select informations of what they understood. This, I can really say this was never my case. Too easy this way. From the informant to the ethnographer, it seems like an Ampel, rot oder grün Licht. I have to pass or not to pass. Doesn't work this way, I'm sorry. This is a strong positivist vision, always there. There is a minimum content of positivism in all these statements and essays. The object is still there. There is nothing to do. The object is the other, and I am the subject. The dual form is not there. So a strongly positivist vision, subject-object dichotomy, actor acted upon. We know instead that ethnography is a process of reciprocal information and especially of reciprocal formation, of reciprocal training. It is a construction of the fact. It is a construction of the data. This construction is tacit, silent. We do not say we will construct the data. We do not say we will construct the fact. It's silent, tacit. At the same time, is public. At the same time. The tacit construction of the data implies co-responsibility and complicity in the construction and in its consequences. That is error and sin, that is guilt. The public construction of the data implies consensus. That is the point. There is a co-responsibility of this construction. To some extent, this is today a very widespread notion. Many consider that the so-called facts become such actually during the period of field work. There are several philosophers of knowledge who are working on this topic. Von Glasersfeld, Maturana, Varela, and so on and so on. So, the so-called facts become such actually during the period of field work. This means that there is no data, but that the data is taken or it is created, hergestellt, by the researcher together with the so-called indigenous, in a dual form, not in a one-way process. Everything is simply elaborated and not given. This is an interesting statement of von Förster on constructing a reality. This was the title of his article. Of course, this is a thought which is very difficult to be accepted. It is difficult for us to accept this. And it is especially difficult for all positivists. And to some extent, all of us, we are positivists, to some extent. It's extremely difficult to come out from this subject-object dichotomy. We worked very hardly in Berlin in the 70s, and you worked before in the 60s, and we continue to work in the 80s. At that time, many people tried, many ethnologists in Berlin tried to come out from so-called Sackgassen of the we will tell this in English, of the historical cultural schools. We also tried to reflect, and I still reflecting, on the notion of anthropology of development, which has been so strongly established again in Europe, and especially in Germany and in Italy, exactly as it is especially well established also these historical cultural schools in Germany and in Italy. There are historical reasons. For the establishment of applied anthropology and development anthropology, there is also, for instance, the so-called Marshall Plan. After the Second World War, we have been developed, and applied anthropologists worked here in Europe, especially in Germany and in Italy. The Marshall Plan was the realization of the so-called Truman Doctrine. And the Truman Doctrine is still the doctrine which has been employed in Afghanistan, or in all countries where you are rebuilding the state, or you are carrying on this institutional building process. So we are still facing old problems. We are still facing the same problems. I will just go directly to the last part. And the last part is simply this. Maybe we have to start to consider the possibility to teach anthropology in the primary school and in the secondary school. This could be really a program for the modern anthropology, so that we can shift from the written to the oral form. So we can better manage this difficulty which has been given to us, unwanted, through the dichotomy subject-object. We have to start to teach anthropology, or better, not to teach anthropology, but we have to start to think anthropologically. This is the difference. So maybe this can be our program for the next immediate future. This can be a chance to overcome the social grammar of the subject-object. This will mean to recover the admission of a co-built reality as expression of Mitsein, as expression of dialogical in-sein. This would allow the understanding, namely, das Wesen, where das Wesen dieses Seienden liegt, zu sein. Can be a role of anthropologists to teach this in the primary school, to teach to think anthropologically. Not as some are doing today, just to showing other cultures or other society. No, to think anthropologically. This implies also the rewriting of textbooks in the schools. We are doing a small and short experiment in Italy with people who are specialized in didactic of history. Now we are trying to rewrite small text for primary school, thinking anthropologically. This implies, to teach what we said, this implies to avoid the objectivation of the other. That objectivation that opens the door to the legitimation of certain interesting actions. I was shocked by a sentence of Victor Turner. Our analysis presupposes a corpse. It's incredible. Exactly that Turner says this was shocking. He did a small criticism, but you can control and check. And from ritual to theater, he writes this. He writes that we have this problem. Our analysis still presupposes a corpse. So this we have not to teach, because it isn't. We may move towards a new pedagogy, and maybe to consider that anthropology has to be free, not only from the complex of Atlas, but also from this dichotomy subject-object. This would be the only way to approach das Fremde on a different way, especially Alterität und Alienität on a different way. I don't know, is this a step towards metaphysic anthropology? We let this for another lecture, so thank you very much.